Welcome back. Today was supposed to be a meeting of EU finance ministers to push through that bailout of Greece's government. This is, of course, after the Greek parliament passed through extremely tough austerity measures, while Athens literally burned all around them outside and riots were going on in the streets. Now, the Greek prime minister said about that kind of violence had no place in a democratic country. But European Member of Parliament Nigel Farage questioned that entire premise in European Parliament today.
What democratic country? He's not even a democratically elected prime minister. He's been appointed by you guys. And Greece isn't run through democracy now, it's run through a troika. 3 foreign officials that fly into Athens airport and tell the Greeks what they can and can't do.
And the Troika has reportedly told Greek leaders it needs more assurances, and it's getting them. Antonis Samaras, a very influential Greek member of parliament, wrote a letter to Troika creditors committing himself to austerity. This is after he alarmed Eurozone leaders when he said he may seek to renegotiate the terms of the bailout after elections. Also adding insult to injury, German Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble said in a radio interview that nothing short of a technocratic government like that of Monti's in Italy may be required to stem the crisis in Greece. Greek politicians are going along with creditors' demands, even though angry mobs are literally gathering at their doors. Look at this outside former Prime Minister Kostas Simitis' house on Sunday. They were calling him a traitor, other names too. Meanwhile, look at this Greek national poll conducted this month. It shows the influence of various political parties in Greece. We want to focus on that 3%. It may not look like a lot, but that is a far-right political party, extreme nationalist party. They don't have members in parliament yet, but 3% is the threshold reportedly at which parties can begin to place their own members in parliament. So are people moving to more radical parties because the others aren't listening to them? This is how we saw the rise of fascism prior to World War II in Europe. I asked MEP Nigel Farage about this earlier. Take a look. Okay, Mr. Farage, let's get straight to it. So you've been critical, rightfully so, of Papademos in Greece as an unelected official, a technocrat put in place by the EU. But in Greece, there's a deeper problem. You have all of these elected officials, democratically elected politicians in parliament who are voting for these deeply unpopular measures as Athens literally has been burning outside of parliament. Why do you think that is?
Well, Sunday was very interesting. Effectively what happened was that the EU have held a gun to their heads in Greece, and they've said to the political class, unless you vote for this bailout package, unless you vote for continued subjugation, we will not give you the next tranche of money, you will go bankrupt, and your reputation internationally will be destroyed. And in the face of that, the Greek political class just don't have the courage to stand up and tell the EU where to go. And, you know, I can see why. I mean, for a country to go bankrupt, to face a devaluation going back to the drachma of perhaps 60 or 70%, it is a difficult thing to do. But I'll tell you this, if they don't do it, they're going to die a different kind of economic death, because the Greek economy is contracting now at an accelerating rate that has now reached 7% per year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in a depression. It's been 5 years that they've had, they've seen a contraction of growth. You have, though, Greek MPs, for example, like Samaras, who's seen by some as possibly the next prime minister, who backpedals away from the electorate every time there's pressure from the EU or from the Troika put on, which you've kind of spoken to. But what's interesting is you have politicians acting against their electoral interests, jeopardizing their re-elections, which is unusual for a politician. What's in it for them?
Yeah, it is a funny one, isn't it? I mean, you simply can't think of Greece as a normal democratic country. It is not a democratic country. You know, its prime minister is a puppet who was put there to dance to the tune of the European Union. We have a troika where we have 3 people that come in, unelected bureaucrats, one from Washington, from the IMF, one from the European Commission, another from the European Central Bank. They're the people, effectively, that are now running Greece. And the political class in Athens, most of them are like rabbits staring in the headlights of this car that is coming straight down towards them and the people. I mean, just think, put yourself in their position. If you take away from people their ability through the ballot box to determine their own future, then violence is all they're left with. And I'm afraid that what we saw on Sunday may be just the start of something really very, very bad indeed.
Well, and it's interesting. We've seen the backlash against politicians in Greece. You've seen Molotov cocktails thrown at the president's house. You've seen a former prime minister have a mob gather around his house, literally harassing him. I don't want to say this lightly, but Europe does have this history. Are you concerned about political assassinations happening again?
I am concerned that if we continue with an austerity package on a country whose economy is already in a downward deflationary death spiral without any compensation, which is what going back to the drachma would give, then I think we're heading for a revolution of some kind in Greece. And I don't want to predict exactly what form that will take. That would be irresponsible. But I think it is. I think the prospect is very, very bad indeed.
And you said before that you're worried about a rise of nationalism as a result of what's going on in Europe. In Greece, according to Gallup polls, a very far-right party could get a seat in parliament if there were elections today. Is this rise in nationalism that's dangerous in your view already in Europe?
Well, in the 30s, when we saw a huge financial disaster and countries crashing out of the gold standard, mass unemployment, what we saw was fascism. And it swept most of Europe. And do not think that that sort of thing cannot happen again. I am very worried about it, and that is why I've always been looking for democratic solutions. I've always believed that if you are going to form a new United States of Europe, you can only do so through free and fair referendums, only do so through consent, and that consent has not been given. And in the case of Greece and Portugal and Spain, the prospects are very bleak indeed. I do not want a rise of extreme fascist nationalism in Europe, but I am terrified that the EU itself is now so powerful and so determined to keep on with its own failing policies that we may well be driving people into this position.
It's quite a warning coming from Nigel Farage, the leader of the United Kingdom Independent Party.